Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the second book of Kings, that is Melachim Bet. We are at chapter 15, that is Perek Tesvav, and we had just we finished chapter 14 with the days of the kingdom of Yeravam, that's Jeroboam the second. It is Yeravam, who is the son of Yehoash, the son of Yehoachaz, the son of Yehu, that at this point, long-lasting house of kings of the northern kingdom of Israel. And we learned how, although Yeravam was a idol-worshipping evil king, and his kingdom was full of corruption, full of the rich taking advantage of the poor and so on, God allowed the people to have those years of prosperity and success and security in order to test them with the carrot rather than the stick. At the same time, and as this has been the pattern in this entire book, flipping back and forth between the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, we're going to flip now to the kingdom of Judah, and we'll find at the same time a similar time of prosperity is going on, and that is what we're about to start reading about the king Azariah. Bishnas Eshrim Vasheva Shana, in the 27th year, Yeravam Melech Yisrael, of the kingdom of Jeroboam, Yeravam the king of Israel, Malach Azariah ben Amatzia Melech Yehuda. Azariah, the son of Amatzia, the king of Yehuda, became the king. Now, we had read that Amatzia was killed by a coup. And then they instead of replacing the king with the head, the leader of the rebellion, which consistently happened in the kingdom of Israel, here the house of David remained king. The people killed Amatzia. That was the second king of Yehuda in a row that was killed by a coup, but they placed his son Azariah in his stead to be the king. So Ben Sheish Esrei Shana Haya b'malcho, he was 16 years old when he took over the kingdom. V'chamishim u'shtayim shana, and he ruled for 52 years, Malach b'Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. V'shem imo, his mother's name was Yichalyahu miRushalayim, from Jerusalem. Vayas hayashar be'einei Adonai, and he did good in the eyes of God, k'chol asher asa Amatzyahu aviv, just as his father Amatzyahu did. And as we mentioned in this book of Kings, Amatzyahu was also mentioned as a good king. The story of how he went bad during his life and why he ended up getting assassinated, all of that, those details were left for the book of Chronicles. But overall, the Melachim the book of Kings that we're reading and studying today wants to give us the impression that they were loyal to God. To a large degree, this was in contradistinction with the kings of Israel, who almost consistently, pretty much consistently, have been labeled as evil, as bad kings. These were being put forward as good kings, and so is Uzziyahu. Now, we also know from tradition and from the book of Chronicles, more details filled out, that Uzziyahu / Azariah, who was the same person, was also in the middle of his career, took a turn for the worse. And we'll have a little hint of that in a minute. Rakabamos lo soro, even though he was faithful to God, this is verse 4, he didn't take away the high places, the altars outside the temple. Od ha'am mizabchimu makatrim b'mamot, even though they were worshiping God, but they were doing what was wrong by sacrificing and bringing incense to God on these other altars, which should not have been done anywhere else other than in the temple. Vayinaga Adonai es hamelach, and God afflicted the king. Vayi mitzora ad yomoso, and he became a leper, and he was a leper through his entire life. So at some point during his kingship, he became a leper, and he remained that way until his death. Exactly why is not revealed here. It seems to be attached to the fact that he wasn't completely faithful to God. And as we know from other sources, like I mentioned before, he was The story goes that he attempted to usurp the priestly worship and bring incense himself, demonstrating his complete lack of understanding of how the temple worked and how the kingdom and the religion, the politicians and the religion, or the church and state, so to speak, need to remain separate. By trying to usurp that and uniting them, he ended up becoming the Mitzorah, but that a leper. Now, that's not here. That's not, remember, in these verses. In these verses, it's just the fact that he wasn't completely faithful to God, and God struck him with leprosy. Vayeshev b'beit hachovshit, and he remained in the house of, literally means the house of freedom. In other words, freedom, a place where he was isolated from others. V'yotam ben hamelach, and his son, Yotam, Alabayit, he was in charge of the house. Shofetet hamaretz, he was being the judge of the peoples of the land. So in other words, he functioned as king during his father's life, because his father's leprosy. V'yeser divrei Azaryahu v'chol asher asa, and all of the things that Azaryahu had done, Aloim ketuvim al sefer divrei hayamim l'malchei Yehuda. If you want to read about it, you can read about it in the book of Chronicles, the annals of the kings of Judah. Vayishkav Azariah mavosav, he passed away, and he was laid to rest. Vayikberu oto mavosav b'ir David, he was laid to rest with the other kings of the house of David in the city of David. Vayimloch Yosam beno tachtav, and then his son Yotam, who had already been functioning as a king, now officially became the king in his stead. Bishnas Shloshim, so that is where we're going to leave the kingdom of Judah for the moment and flip back to the northern kingdom. Until this point, the northern kingdom had a tremendous period of wealth, a tremendous period of strength, of expansion, of prosperity, and they used that to become even more corrupt, even more oppressive towards the poor, and so on, as we mentioned before. And a similar pattern we know was going on in Yehuda under the reign of Uziyahu and Yotam. We know this from the books of Hosea and the other prophets who were admonishing the people at this time. When we studied all the books together of the Trei Asar, the 12 minor prophets, those prophets were all prophesying at this time, criticizing the people for using the wealth that God had given them for bad purposes, for corrupt purposes. Now, when things start going downhill completely in the north, in the kingdom of Israel, and that's what we're going to read about for the rest of this chapter. The people were so wealthy and so occupied with their own greed that, of course, one of the things that people get greedy about is, of course, money, promiscuity, but also power. And when people fight over power, it causes instability. When it causes instability, it invites enemies. And that's what we're going to read about, that decline that occurred in the north. So they failed the tests of poverty, they failed the tests of wealth, and now they are going to self-destruct. And it is important to note that the destruction of the ultimate destruction of the northern kingdom, which we're not going to get to this chapter, but we're going to be reading about the lead up to it and how it happened and in what environment it happened, was of their own doing. It was their own corruption that brought it about. It wasn't through some miraculous event. Bishnas 38 shana, in the 32nd year of Azaryahu Melech Yehuda, of the reign of Uziyahu, or Azaryahu, or Azariah, all the same person, in Judah, Malach Zechariyahu, the king Zechariyahu, this is a name that pops up several times, is of course the prophet Zechariah, who's much, much later in history. And there's a Zechariah, the prophet, which we read about during the time of Yehoash, which we had a couple chapters ago. But this is a different Zechariah, who is the fifth in the line of Yehu for the kingdom of Israel, the son of Jeroboam, the second, the son of Yeravam, al Yisrael, over the kingdom of Israel. He ruled B'Shomron and Samaria Shisha Chadashim for 6 months. Vayas hara be'enei Adonai, he did bad and evil in the eyes of God, kasher asu avosav, like his forefathers before him. Lo sar mechatos Yeravam ben Nevat asher achtias Yisrael, he did not turn away from the sins of Yeravam ben Nevat, the original king of Israel, who led the people of Israel into sin. And what happened after 6 months? Vayikshor alav Shalom ben Yavesh, Shalom, the son of Yavesh, conspired against him, Vayakeu kaval and he struck him down in front of all the people, Vayimiseu, and killed him, Vayimloch tachtav, and he took over the crown, and he took over the kingship. So this is a complete. Whereas in the Judah, we also had coups, which are also obviously not a good sign, not a sign of stability, but there was some semblance of stability that remained. The coup was done at least in the name of restoring the honor of the house of David by killing a king that the people that perpetrated the coup were claiming that they were doing it to get rid of a king who's bad. Here, the king was killing the wannabe king, killed the king simply in order to take over. But yes, there's Divrei Zechariah. So now that Zechariah has been assassinated, you should just know that anything else about Zechariah's reign, if you're interested in reading about what he accomplished in the very short reign of 6 months, Hinam Ksuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayamim Lachi Yisrael. You can read about it in the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. So over here, now we have fulfilled the prophecy that we read many chapters ago. Hu Dvar Adonai. This is the fulfillment of the word of God. Asher Diber El Yehu Lemar. That God spoke to Yehu, saying as follows: Bnei Revi'im Yeshvu Lacha Al Kisei Yisrael Vayichein. That the fourth generation from you will sit on the throne, and that is exactly how it was. This was the fourth generation from Yehu. There was Yehoachaz, Yehoash, Yeravam, and now Zechariah, and that was the end of the house of Yehu, and the end of that period in history, the last somewhat stable monarchy to rule the northern kingdom. Shalom ben Yavesh Molach b'shnat 39 shana. Shalom, the king who had just became king by assassinating Zechariah, he became king in the 39th year, Uzziah melech Yehuda, of Uzziah, the king of Yehuda. Vayimloch. So here we have again Uzziah being called Azariah, being called Uzziah. Again, remember that's the same person. Vayimloch Yarach Yamim b'Shomron, and he was king for a full month in Samaria. Now everything is falling apart. Vayal Menachem ben Gadi mi Tirza. Menachem, the son of Gadi, came from the town of Tirza. Vayavo Shomron, he came to Samaria. Vayachet Shalom ben Yavesh, and he struck down Shalom ben Yavesh b'Shomron in Samaria, in the capital. Vayimiseu, and he put him to death. Vayimloch tachtav, and he took over the kingdom from him. So this is another coup, just a month later. So 6 months to Zechariah, Shalom becomes king for 1 month. Menachem ben Gadi becomes king. This is a total mess. Now remember, all of this is during a time of relative peace where the kingdom of Assyria had eliminated Aram as a major power. That's now a generation or two back. So the people are living in a time when they think everything is fine. So what do? Instead of strengthening themselves and building up a solid, stable nation in order to stand up to any future challengers, it just became a big, giant mess where it was just each man trying to be as selfish as possible and get as much power and wealth as they could. So if you want to know about what Shalom accomplished during his brief 30 days in command and the king as a king, V'yeser Divrei Shalom, V'kishro Asher Kashar, and all the details of his conspiracy and in which he killed the king. Hinam Ksuvim al Sefer Divrei Yamim Malchi Yisrael. The whole story is written in the book of Chronicles. It's not the place here to discuss it. You can read it there. Oz Yakem Menachem, and what did this Menachem do? He took over and he struck at Tifsach. He struck down the place called Tifsach, right? The V'yaskol Asher Ba and everything in it, V'yat Gvuleha and the surrounding cities, Mitirza from the area of Tirza, Kilo Patach, because they didn't open their doors to him. In other words, they didn't let him in. They closed their gates. So he just struck the whole thing down. Vayach. Ate kol he'aroseha bikeat. But in order to demonstrate the cruelty and the savagery with which he attacked this city, he chopped open the bellies of all the pregnant women. As horrific, as absolutely horrific as that sounds, the verse is trying to give us a taste and give us a sense for just how vicious this person Menachem was, and just what kind of people we're dealing with. People that will kill for anything, and just to get a general idea of just how far the people sunk. Now, while all this is going on, of course, a little to the north, east, the kingdom of Assyria is now knows what's happening with Israel, and the kingdom of Assyria is ascendant, and they're starting to look outward to expand their empire, which eventually they did, and so that's what's happening up in Assyria now, and they're starting to see that instability in this small nation, and they're seeing their chance to take it over and build their own empire. So, Bishnas Shloshim V'Teisha, just keep that in the background, keep that in your mind. Bishnas Shloshim V'Teisha Shana Azariah Melech Yehuda. So, in the 39th year of Azariah, the king of Judah, Malach Menachem ben Gadi al Yisrael es Hashanah b'Shomron. Menachem, the son of Gadi, was the king. He was the king we were reading about. Ruled for 10 years. So he took over from Shalom, who was king for a month. He took over from Zechariah, who was king for 6 months, and he himself ruled for 10 years. Vayas Horabe Ne Adonai, just in case you didn't realize that he was an evil guy, he did bad in the eyes of God. Lo sor me al chados Yeravam ben Nevat asher achties Yisrael kol yamav. He didn't turn away from the path of the original Yeravam, the original king of Israel, who led the people of Israel in sin, and he did that his entire life. And what happened? Just as we warned. Bapul melech Ashur al aretz. Pul, the king of Assyria, came and threatened the land. Now, at this point, it is assumed that Pul is a short for Tiglath-Pileser. Tiglath-Pileser is a well-known king of Assyria, well-known both from biblical sources, and he's going to come up and play a significant role very soon within this very chapter. And he was also well-known from extra biblical sources, from archaeological excavations, from literature, etc. So Tiglath-Pileser, nicknamed the Pul, came from Assyria, but at this point he wasn't quite powerful enough to conquer them and destroy them, or maybe not ready enough to do that. At this point he wanted to make them a vassal state, and since Menachem was the king of Israel, it was such a mess, and he did not have the power to hold off Assyria, so he bought them off. Vayitain Menachem lepul elef kikar kosef. He gave them 1,000 talents of silver, liyos yadav ito lahachzik hamamlecha biyado, so that his hand would be with him. In other words, he became a vassal king in order to strengthen the kingdom in his hand. So Menachem, rather than stand and fight, figured he'll pay off Assyria, and this way he'll have the power of the Assyrian crown behind him and keep him as the king of Israel. Now, Vayotze Menachem, how did Menachem get this money? He forcibly extracted it from the people. Etzakesef al Yisrael al kol gibore achayo. He took it from his soldiers, literally, but by doing that, weakening his own defense. Laseis l'melech Ashur, by making his own army pay off the king in order to keep Menachem in charge. Chamishim shkalim kesef l'ishecha, that's 50 shekels of silver per person. Vayashav melech Ashur v'lo amad sham ba'aretz. So at that point, the king of Assyria accepted the payment, and he didn't stay there. So Menachem stays in charge. He has a discontented army, and he has a discontented people that he forced them to pay tribute to Assyria rather than fight them in order for himself to stay in power. This person, remember, is the person who was so vicious that he led the terrible attack that we read about with the atrocities that were mentioned in the verses before. If you want to know more about what Menachem did, they're written you could read them in the annals of the kings of Israel. Vayishkav Menachem im avosav. Menachem passed away. Vayimloch Pekachia beno tachtav. And Pekachia, who's also known as Pekachia, his son, became ruler after him. So again, Azariah had a long Uzziyahu, who was in Judah, who was a leper at this point, but he reigned for a long time in absentia through his son Yotam. So in his 50th year of Azariah Melech Yehuda, Malach Pekachia ben Menachem al Yisrael b'Shomron shnasayim. Pekachia, the son of Menachem, ruled in Samaria for 2 years. And just in case you might have thought otherwise, Vayasa Ra be'enei Adonai, he did evil in God's eyes. Lo sar mechatos Yeravam ben Nevat asher achties Yisrael. He didn't stray from the path of the original Jeroboam, the original Yeravam, that led the people into sin. So now we're about to have another coup by someone else. again, now remember, all the people are upset, especially the armies. So one of the leaders of the army, who was angry at Pekachia because of what his father had done, Vayikshar Olav conspired against him, a guy named Pekach ben Remalyahu, Shalisho, who was one of his army generals. Vayakehu b'Shomron, and he struck him down in Samaria, Ba'armon Beis HaMelech, in the palace of the king's house, et Argov et Ha'aryeh, near the Argov and the Aryeh. V'imo, these would be, it's not clear, some of the Mefarshim understand, the commentaries understand them to be strong guards who were with the king, guarding the king, that they were either, that they may have been part of this conspiracy, or they may have been standing there, and despite them, he struck them down as well, depending on how you read the verse. And with him he had 50 of the Giladites, right? And he killed him, and he took over. So now we have another king, Pekach ben Remalyahu, who took over from Pekachia, who was the son of Menachem, okay, who had killed Shalom, who had killed Zechariah. So this is just a giant mess. So now, at this time, so they're a vassal state to Assyria, and Pekach ben Remalyahu, who is part of what his thing is, he was angry that we didn't fight, we didn't stand up to Assyria. Pekach ben Remalyahu is going to want to stand up to Assyria and going to want to lead a rebellion against Assyria, which isn't going to go very well, but we're not there yet. And so he killed Pekachia, whose father had paid off Assyria. So, and Pekach and his men were obviously quite upset that they were forced to pay this tribute that they didn't want to pay to begin with. B'shnas chamishim u'shtayim shana, this is verse 27, in the 52nd year of Azariah Melech Yehuda, of Azariah the king of Judah, Molach Pekach ben Remalyahu al Yisrael b'Shomron esrim shana. Pekach ben Remalyahu ruled over the people of Israel in the north, in the capital Samaria, for 20 years. And again, in case you wanted to know what kind of a guy he was, he also did evil in God's eyes. He continued on the path of the original Jeroboam, led the people in sin. Now at this time, things are getting more heated. Now, Tiglat-Pileser, the king of Assyria, Melech Ashur, came. He started to strike. Now it's no more just tribute. Now he's conquering. And he took from Pekach et Iyun, v'et Avel, Beit Maacha, v'et Yonoach, v'et Kedesh, v'et Chatzor, v'et Hagilad, v'et Hagalila, Kol Eretz Naphtali, the entire land of Naphtali, v'yaglem Ashura, and he took the captives in exile to Assyria. So here, he's starting to chip away at the northern kingdom, conquering the areas on the outskirts. Not completely conquering the northern kingdom yet. So now, Pekach is now led the people, and led them into, obviously he rebelled against Assyria and no longer wanted to be a vassal anymore. And the punishment came by all of these cities being taken and all of the residents of those cities being exiled into Assyria. So now the people are even more upset. The other people are angry, and the army are angry at Pekach for leading them in this. So Vayikshar Kesher Hoshea ben Elah, another person conspired. Hoshea ben Elah conspired al Pekach ben Remalyahu against Pekach the king. Vayakeo, and struck him Vayimiseo and killed him. Vayimloch tachtav, and he started ruling Bishnas Esrim in the 20th year of Yotam ben Uzziah, of the reign of Yotam the son of Uzziah. So now Pekach is gone, and Hoshea ben Elah is now in charge. Another conspiracy, another assassination, and another king. So as you can tell, the point being that this just gets worse and worse and worse. Now, if you want to read about the history of Pekach, v'yeser divrei Pekach v'chol asher asa hinam ksuvim al sefer divrei hayamim l'malchei Yisrael. And the other things that Pekach did, if you want to read his history, what he accomplished, what he didn't accomplish, etc., you can go ahead and read the chronicles of the kings of Israel. Now, Bishnas, so this now is the the last king that we're going to read about of the northern kingdom of Israel. So we're going to get back to Hosea and the ultimate downfall of the kingdom of Israel soon, but not yet. We're going to leave them there, and let's go catch up a little bit before we finish this chapter. Let's catch up on what's going on in Judah. In the second year of the reign of Pekach, Malach Yotam ben Uziyahu Melech Yisrael. Yotam, the son of Uziyahu, he became the king. Melech Yehuda became the king over Judah. So we're flipping back to the southern kingdom to catch us up. So now we have Yotam being the king at the same time as Pekach. Now, just to give you a little background, and you may remember this if you studied with us Isaiah back in the beginning of this podcast, the book of Isaiah, that Pekach, because he wanted to rebel against Assyria, right, he allied himself with Aram. He allied himself with the Aram, the remaining nation Aram, which was by now also a vassal of Assyria. We mentioned that in the last couple of podcasts. And he also allied himself with several other smaller nations, like the nation of Tyre, Tzur, and it slipped my mind right now, but other small, several other small nations. The one nation that did not want to join, so by making these alliances, these smaller kings felt that they could make a big enough alliance to counter the increasingly powerful Assyrian Empire, which was really the first of the major empires in the history of the Middle East. So now that we're back during the lifetime of Pekach, Yotam, who was the king of Yehuda, the king of Judah, did not join this alliance. And we're going to see why that's important in a second. Yotam in Judah was 25 years old when he became king. He was king for 16 years. His mother's name was Yerusha, daughter of Tzadok. He did proper in the eyes of God. He did like his father Uziyahu did. In other words, he was faithful to God, just like Uziyahu was and Amaziyahu was. The setup being given here to show us that the people of Judah were more faithful to God. They were far from perfect, as we can tell by reading the words of the prophets of Isaiah and Hosea, who were criticizing the people and their corruption. But to some degree, they were better, especially in their spiritual relationship with God. They were better. However, also he didn't stop with the high places. The people were still bringing sacrifices outside the temple. But he also built up the house of God. He built the upper gate, whatever gate that is. There's different opinions as to what exactly gate that's referring to. And if you want to know all about what Yotam did, those are written in the annals of the chronicles of the kings of Judah. And then, and as I mentioned before, Pekach ben Remaliahu allied himself with Ritzin, the king of Aram, in order to counter the Assyrians. And they were upset that Yotam, the king of Judah, did not want to join them in that alliance. And therefore, they attacked the people of Yehuda, the people of Judah. By Yamim Haim in those days, this is the time period where Heichel Adonai, God started Lashliach b'Yehuda to send against the people of Judah, who were also corrupt. And we learn this from all of the prophets, like I mentioned before. Even though they were more faithful to God than the kingdom of Israel, they still were corrupt, and God punished them in the sense of sending against them Ritzin melech Aram v'et Pekach ben Remaliahu. So the king of Israel and the king of Aram acted against the kingdom of Judah in order, and we know from historical sources and from other sources through the Tanakh, which we mentioned when we studied the other prophets, that their intention was to bring Judah they wanted to get rid of Yotam and put in place a monarch that was more friendly to them in the kingdom of Judah in order to bring them into their alliance against Assyria. Vayishkav Yotam im Yavosav. Yotam passed away and he laid with his fathers. Vayikaver im Yavosav b'ir David Aviv, and he was buried in the city of David, his ancestor. Vayimloch Achaz beno tachtav, and his son Achaz ruled in his stead. And we will learn later that Achaz ultimately did capitulate to the Assyrians rather than join the alliance of the other kings. But that we learn later. We studied that together in Isaiah, and I jumped a little ahead of myself, and I'm sorry for doing that. And we will pick up in the next chapter um, on this story of Achaz and his kingship. So thank you so much for studying chapter 15 together. Looking forward to studying chapter 16 and this entire book of Kings together. Have a wonderful day.